Hello, my name is Andres Ordóñez. Today I am going to speak about the silence in 20 minutes. First, the architecture of silence. We live in an era that treats silence as a vacuum, a terrifying empty space that must be immediately filled with the friction of sound. From the moment we wake up, our environments are fluid, the ping of notifications, the hum of traffic, the low frequency drawn with appliances, and the constant eternal chatter of our own minds create a resonant symphony noise. We have become so accustomed to this auditory clutter that true silence often feels uncomfortable, even hostile. When the music stops or our conversation dies, an inexplicable anxiety tends to creep in. But where are we actually running from? Noise is often a shield we use to protect ourselves from our own thoughts. Silence, therefore, is not the absence of sound, but the presence of self. The sitting silent is sought to trip away to harmony. In this first stage of quiet, the mind becomes like a stirred up jar of muddy water. The atrocity violently at first demanded adaptation, refusing a settle. The comfort you feel in the first few minutes of absolute quiet is entirely normal. It is simply the mind adjusts to the sudden lack of external stimuli. 2. The acoustic sanctuary. As you push past, as you push past the entire discomfort, the nature of silence begins to shift. It transforms from a void into a sanctuary in the absence of artificial noise. Users begin to recalibrate. User to noise the micro sounds of accents. To remake growing cadence of own breath, the distance gender ruled or lives outside a window, the sitting curse of the view around you. There are no disrupts there is silence. There are the textures here in the sanctuary your nervous system begins to downshift. The correct fight or flight response triggered by the frightening morning's world slowdowns, giving way to a state of rest and repair. Scientifically, periods of sedentary silence have been shown to stimulate neurogenesis, the growth of new cells in the hippocampus, the region of the brain associated with memory and emotion. By doing nothing, by hearing nothing, you're actively rebuilding yourself. 3. The Green Mirror. By now, the external world has faded into the background, and the internal world takes center stage. Silent act as a flawless mirror. Without the distraction of entertainment or small talk, you are forced to comfort whatever layering beneath the surface. Unresolved emotions. Creative ideas, forgotten memories, and buried anxious overflow out of the top. This is the crucial of silence. It can be incredibly intense, but it's also profound healing. The diagnosis by traffic. What it hides, created reality. What only reveals the beauty of the present moment. That is a comparative query. If the things is nothing nices, is external noise, major traffic, social noise, small talk, gossip, and internal noise overthinking. Another is what it hides, that is current really true feelings and intuition. For all wanted that. And the ultimate what suddenly reveals the beauty of the present moment of the thing connection is oneself clarity and deep wisdom. What you all to style internal voices to speak without interrupting with new distractions. They eventually run out of the steam. The mirror clouds, you begin to see your life not through the lens of panic of reactivity, but with a cool, calm clarity of an objective observer. 4. The canvas of creativity. Every great artist, writer, and thinker knows that creation requires a blank canvas. In the realm of the mind, silence is that canvas without periods of emptiness. There is no room for inspiration to strike. When the mind is constantly consuming information, it acts as a passive receiver, but in the flux soul of silence. The brain begins to make unexpected connections. It silences past experience, solves complex problems, and brings on original ideas. Mm, a sentence by Thomas Carlyle say silence is the element in which great things fashion themselves together. Think of a musical masterpiece. Okay, the virus song does not lie slowly in the notes played, but in the space between the notes, where the rest of the music will just be a chaotic. Defending a wall of sound, your life operations accept the same principle, your actions, your words, and your actions gain meaning when they are motivated by moments of pause. And 5. Returning to the song. As this period, try to view silence not as luxury or waste of time. Oh no, at this period of reflection draws to a close. Take a moment to appreciate this likeness you have cultivated. You cannot live in isolation forever, nor should you. Nor should you. The world of sound, connection, and action is beauty and necessary. However, you can carry a piece of this quiet center back into the noise with you. Moving forward, try to be silence and as a luxury or a waste of time, but it's as a building nutrient to your soul. You don't need to climb a mountain or recreate a monastery to find up. It is always available to you, right beneath the surface with a noise, waiting for you simply to breathe and listen to the beauty nothings. Um, in the anodic modern, in the vocabulary of the modern world, silence is often defined by what it lacks, with dictionary defined substance of sound and composition void, or a blank space between periods of activity. However, turning silence and mere negative space is a proud understanding of its architecture. Silence is not empty. It is a heavy with presence. It is the canvas upon which all sound is painted, the baseline of consciousness, and a biological necessary that our hyper-connected society is rapidly losing. As cities expand and technology integrates into very every second of our lives, obsolete silence has become one of the rarest commodities on earth. We are constantly baited in a low frequency coil of engine hums. Our conditioning units, data, information, and the ambient of the road of the human destiny that takes us an invitation to step away from the noses and detect what happens to the brains, our bodies, and our cultures when we choose to quiet the world. To quiet the world. The, neurological reality of quiet. For decades, for decades scientists studied silence in laboratories simply as a control group. The baselines a set of nothing against which they measure the brain's reaction to words, music, or noise. However, recent breakthroughs is neuroimaging have related that the brain is never truly key. In fact, when external sounds stops, an entire internal network lights up. The Fulmore network. When you're in a quiet room without a task to perform, your brain switches to what neuroscientists call the Fulmore network, DNN. Mental integration. These networks connect disappeared parts of the brain, allowing you to process past experience and construct future scenarios. Self-reflection. It is engine to it is engine of autobiography. It is where you figure out who you are, and the danger of constant input. When we fill every quiet moment by looking at the smartphone or listening to a podcast, we step into the end of our energy needs to consider the memories and nice size emotional truths. Neurogenesis and the hippocampus. In 2013, a landmark study published in the journal Brain, a structural and flotation monitored and effects and different type of sound of the brain of mice. The researchers discovered that while music had temporal effects, 2 hours of absolute silence per day led to the development of no functional cells in a hippocampus, because the hippocampus is the epicenter of learning, memory, and emotional regulation. The discovery proved that quiet environments physically revealed the brain's hardware. The physiology of the inside. Human communication is built as much or on what we will hold as what we express. In physiology, silence is a multifaceted thought that can combine comfort, hostility, intimacy, or trauma. The dynamics of human conversation. In Western culture, a passive conversation that lasts longer than 4 seconds create a measurable spike in anxiety. Whereas to fully grab with flattering more words like I'm right, because we perceive the silence as a breakdown in a social harmony. However, in many indigenous and Aztec cultures, silence is a sign of disrespect and deep cognitive processing. To respond instantly to a question, viewed as thoughtless, a deliberate pause shows that the speaker's words are being given the weight they deserve. Okay, again, we continue. Part 3. Creative and artistic blackness. Every artistic discipline relies on a relationship with the void. Without restriction and empty space, art becomes over, overwhelming and unravel. Music. The space between the notes. Is a pianist were to hold down every key on the piano simultaneous, the result will not be music. It will be noise. The breadth of composition lies in the restraint of a composer. Consider the famous avant-garde composition 1433 by John Cage. The piece instructs the performer not to play their instruments for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The purpose of the piece of the forced audience to realize absolute silence does not exist in a concert. All the codes, the rustle of fragrance, and the sounds of the wine outside become the music. Literature, subtext, and the unwriting. In literature, the most powerful authors say more without a more that what they include. The concept of subtextualization theory and on textual silence. When Chocarto speaks about the reader, but the reader understands there are actually discoded the collapse after a marriage, the true narratives happen to in the ungrading space between the dialogue lines. The dialogue lines. 4. The path forward in a on a loud world. We cannot easily we cannot easily take infrastructure of a noisy word, but we can change of our relationship to it. However, Stanley does not require moving to the cabinet of words. It requires creating intentional bonds without of daily routines. Practical studies are a visual of how the thought required. First, the digital staff dedicate just 1 hour every day, preferably the most or less hour of the day, to absolute device silence, no screens, no background music, and no notifications. 2. Radical listening. In your next conversation, practice wait a full seconds after the other person finishes speaking before you formulate your response. Notice how the dynamic change. Sensory fasting. Sit quickly for 10 minutes without trying to solve a problem perfectly. Or archive agreement simply on the bottom of or drugs to resolve its own. Conclusion: the ultimate luxury. As the Woolworth laudable share and more demanded of our attention, silence tradition for being a natural state to become the ultimate luxury. It is an act of quiet, revealed to sit still and listen, be nothing, to nothing. By intentionally stepping it up into the quiet, we reclaim our time, our rotation, and our fundamental humanity. The next time you feel yourself in a quiet room, do not rush to feel it. Speed it through, look at the mirror, and let the silence speak. Thank you very much for listening to me, and we hope you learn something. Thank you very much, and goodbye.